59% of self-identified liberals say there have been times when they considered leaving America for good, like after NBC canceled The West Wing. I don't get it. You want so badly for every immigrant to come to this country and experience the good life, but somehow it's so terrible you want to leave?
America is not perfect, and few people seriously argue that it is. However, there is a major difference between recognizing a nation's challenges and describing the entire country as a failed experiment, as though everything it has built has completely fallen apart. That distinction sits at the center of a debate that has sparked strong reactions across the political spectrum.
A bunch of privileged mean girls complaining about privilege and trying to make fetch happen. Maybe the problem is that lots of people today are entitled whiners who have no perspective and no idea how good they have it.
That is why Bill Maher's response to Sunny Hostin attracted so much attention. His comments appeared to address more than a single statement. Instead, they challenged a broader outlook that views one of the world's wealthiest and most influential nations as a place with little hope for the future. Whether people agree or disagree, the exchange quickly became one of the most talked about political moments on television. Before breaking down the disagreement, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. The discussion reaches far beyond one television debate and touches on larger questions about how America's progress is measured. During the conversation, Sunny Hostin described America as a failing experiment, before later explaining that she still believed there was reason for hope. That clarification raised even more questions for many viewers. If the country is truly failing, and if today's generation is believed to have fewer civil rights than previous generations, it naturally leads to an important question. What evidence best supports that conclusion? That became one of the central issues driving the debate. Much of Bill Maher's criticism centered on the broader historical picture. America's history has never followed one perfectly smooth path, and few would argue otherwise. The nation has experienced setbacks, periods of division, and significant challenges that continue to deserve serious discussion. At the same time, Maher's argument suggested that portraying the country's history as nothing but continuous decline overlooks the complexity of that history and the many changes that have taken place over time. That perspective became the foundation of the debate that followed. That kind of argument relies more on emotion than careful analysis, and that is exactly where the debate becomes so intense. Some people are naturally drawn to narratives that suggest everything is getting worse, because those stories can create a powerful sense of urgency and purpose. In that framework, the speaker becomes the person sounding the alarm, warning that serious problems demand immediate attention.
And is it possible for a country to lose itself so much that leaving it is justified? Yes, but we're not there yet, not by a long shot, and we don't need quitters. We need people who will stay and fix it. Maybe the problem isn't that America isn't worth defending. Maybe the problem is that lots of people today are entitled whiners who have no perspective and no idea how good they have it.
Some commentators argue that nearly every political setback is presented as evidence of a much larger national failure. In those discussions, election results, policy disagreements, and cultural debates are sometimes framed as signs that the country is moving toward crisis, rather than reflecting the normal disagreements found in a democracy. That style of rhetoric has become a major point of contention in today's political landscape. What makes Bill Maher's criticism stand out is his long-established political background. He is not generally associated with conservative politics and has spent decades openly criticizing Republicans, religious institutions, Donald Trump, and many other public figures across the political spectrum. That history gives additional attention to his argument that parts of the modern political left have drifted away from a more balanced approach. His remarks therefore attracted interest from audiences on multiple sides of the debate. Maher's broader point is that there is a meaningful difference between advocating for reform and portraying the entire country as fundamentally broken. There is also a difference between pushing for greater justice and suggesting that decades of progress should be dismissed or overlooked. Those distinctions became central to the conversation surrounding Sunny Hostin's comments. Supporters of that perspective argue that ignoring historical progress risks minimizing the achievements of earlier generations. The advances made through the civil rights movement, legal reforms, expanded opportunities, greater representation, and broader participation across business, politics, education, and media all reflect significant changes over time. Recognizing those accomplishments does not mean current problems should be ignored, but many believe they deserve to remain an important part of the broader national conversation rather than being overshadowed entirely by narratives focused only on decline.
Because just like we did here tonight, you have to talk to each other and you have to hear the other side. And I speak to a different group. I don't want anybody who's ideologically captured. I speak to the normies. I speak to the people who don't want there to be hate anymore in America. If there's any theme of this, is that I am tired of the hate. I don't want to hate half the country.
Critics of that perspective argue that the message can sometimes feel disconnected from everyday reality. When those claims are delivered from a nationally televised program by someone with significant public influence, they may strike some viewers differently than if they came from someone without a large platform. That contrast became one of the central points raised during the discussion. Sunny Hostin is a well-known television personality with a successful career, national recognition, and a platform that reaches millions of viewers. For that reason, some questioned whether describing America as a failed experiment accurately reflected the opportunities that also helped shape her own professional success. That does not mean criticism of the country is inappropriate. Open debate and criticism have always been part of American public life, but some believe the conversation should also recognize areas where meaningful progress has occurred. Many everyday Americans hear those comments while focusing on practical concerns, such as rising grocery costs, housing expenses, employment, and providing for their families. From that perspective, broad statements describing the country as a failed experiment may not reflect how they view their own lives or experiences. That gap in perspective often fuels strong reactions from both sides of the political debate. This broader disagreement reflects an argument Bill Maher has raised repeatedly over the years. He has suggested that some political voices place so much emphasis on highlighting problems that examples of progress receive far less attention. According to that view, if positive developments are acknowledged too often, they weaken the larger narrative of ongoing decline. As a result, many issues are presented in the most dramatic terms possible, further deepening political divisions and public disagreement.
I corrected myself as a failing.
Failing, that's what I was going to ask. So you still have hope?
I think, yeah, I have hope. But the notion that in 2026, my children have less civil rights than I had.
Votes are in. They don't want your pity. And black people can't afford to indulge rich white people's need to endlessly flagellate themselves. They just want prices to go down and good jobs and the police when you call them. Black people, they're just like us.
Bill Maher also pointed to another argument that has generated attention over the years: the repeated promises by some public figures to leave the United States after election results they strongly oppose. Following several election cycles, celebrities, entertainers, and online personalities have publicly suggested they might relocate, only for many of them to remain where they are. That contrast has become a frequent topic in political commentary and late-night discussions. Critics argue that this creates an obvious contradiction. Many of the same voices describing America in extremely negative terms continue living and working in some of the country's most successful cities, building careers, attending major events, and benefiting from the opportunities available there. For those critics, the difference between the rhetoric and the reality naturally raises questions about how those claims should be interpreted. The debate becomes even more complicated when discussions about immigration enter the picture. Some commentators ask how America can simultaneously be described as fundamentally broken while also being presented as a destination that millions of people hope to reach. Supporters of that argument believe those two ideas can be difficult to reconcile when expressed without additional context. For many immigrants, the decision to come to the United States has never depended on the country being perfect. Instead, it has often been driven by the belief that America offers opportunities that may be harder to find elsewhere. Those opportunities can involve education, employment, entrepreneurship, or greater personal freedom. The path is often challenging and far from guaranteed, but many continue to see value in the possibility of building a better future. that continuing sense of opportunity remains an important part of the broader national conversation. The broader argument is that much of the America is failing rhetoric is driven less by the country itself and more by political conflict. According to that perspective, those messages often become louder after elections, shift with changes in political power, and sometimes evolve into symbolic statements about identity rather than practical discussions about solving problems. Critics argue that, in those moments, the focus moves away from improving the country and toward demonstrating moral or political superiority. That is the larger trend Bill Maher has repeatedly criticized. His concern centers on the growing political hostility that treats those with different views as impossible to understand or engage with. He has argued that political disagreements have become increasingly personal, creating deeper divisions instead of encouraging productive conversations. Many observers believe that constant political conflict has simply become exhausting for large numbers of Americans.
Just like there's a long list of liberal celebrities who swear they'll go if a Republican is elected, and no one ever does. Miley Cyrus once said, "I am moving if Trump is my president. I don't say things I don't mean." Here she is looking miserable, having to endure America at the Grammys last Sunday. I guess she flew back from Tajikistan.
For many people, daily life revolves around much more immediate concerns than ideological debates. Paying household bills, keeping children safe, getting to work, managing rising prices, and handling everyday responsibilities often take priority over the latest political arguments dominating television and social media. Those practical issues tend to shape how many voters evaluate public officials and policy decisions. Maher has argued that this is where some political messaging misses the mark. In his view, voters are sometimes spoken to as though they are participants in academic discussions about complex political theories, when many are primarily focused on everyday challenges affecting their families and communities. Rather than viewing voters as abstract political categories, he suggests recognizing them as individuals navigating real-world concerns, from grocery shopping and fuel costs to balancing work, finances, and family life every single day. Many voters focus first on practical concerns: crime, schools, employment, rising living costs, and whether government leaders appear connected to everyday life often rank higher than political slogans. When those issues seem overlooked, voters tend to notice. Critics of the argument that Vice President Kamala Harris's electoral loss can be explained only by racism or sexism say that such a conclusion oversimplifies a far more complicated election. They argue that campaign messaging, the economy, immigration, public safety, and many other factors also played significant roles. Bill Maher has pointed to Barack Obama's elections as an example of why broad political narratives deserve closer examination. Obama was elected president twice, a fact Maher argues demonstrates that the country's political story is more complex than reducing every election outcome to a single explanation. Acknowledging that complexity does not suggest prejudice has disappeared, but it does highlight that voters can make decisions for many different reasons rather than one alone. Another point raised in the discussion is that voters sometimes reject candidates after fully considering their message. According to this perspective, disagreement does not automatically mean people were misled or failed to understand what was being offered. Instead, many simply reached a different conclusion. Critics argue that responding to those voters with lectures rather than self-reflection risks widening the gap between political leaders and the public. That concern extends to the broader tone of modern political debate. Many people do not enjoy being told their priorities are morally flawed because they place greater emphasis on everyday expenses than on the latest political or academic terminology. Concerns about safe neighborhoods, affordable housing, secure borders, quality schools, and economic stability are viewed by many as ordinary issues affecting daily life, rather than extreme political positions. Maher has also argued that millions of Americans are not deeply immersed in politics every day. Many are not constantly following cable news, debating online, or allowing politics to dominate every personal relationship. Instead, they simply want effective government, less division, more practical leadership, and the ability to disagree respectfully without being viewed as enemies. That, according to Maher, remains one of the biggest challenges facing today's political climate. Sunny Hostin has every right to describe America as a failing experiment, if that is her view. Ironically, many supporters of Bill Maher's argument point out that the ability to express that opinion openly on a national television program is itself one of the freedoms that defines the country. Where Maher's response drew attention was not in challenging the right to criticize America, but in questioning whether constant criticism, without acknowledging progress, creates a balanced picture. According to his argument, criticism without appreciation eventually becomes background noise rather than constructive debate. Maher also suggested that outrage without perspective can become more about performance than progress. Likewise, activism without humility risks becoming centered on the individual instead of the cause. From that perspective, America benefits less from dramatic declarations and more from thoughtful conversations focused on practical solutions.
You called America a failed experiment when you were on Friday.
Well, and I corrected myself as a failing.
Failing. That's what I was going to ask. So you still have hope.
I think, yeah, I have hope. But the notion that in 2026, my children have less civil rights than I had.
That's horrible and terrifying.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
And so any scientific experiment that you would take, because I've discussed this with my husband, because apparently he heard some of the blowback when I said it's a failing experiment. If an experiment is working, this type of thing doesn't happen. There are leaps forward, not backwards.
Critics of today's political climate often argue that everyday concerns deserve as much attention as ideological battles. The larger point centers on leadership and public dialogue. Many believe the country needs leaders willing to debate difficult issues without treating political opponents as enemies. It also needs conversations that recognize voters are capable of reaching different conclusions without assuming bad intentions. According to Maher, acknowledging America's flaws should never require dismissing everything the country has achieved or suggesting that decades of progress simply do not matter. Another part of the discussion focused on perspective. The loudest voices often receive the most attention, especially in an era driven by social media and viral headlines. But volume does not always determine wisdom. Many Americans recognize that the nation faces real challenges, including economic pressures, political division, and institutional frustrations. At the same time, they also recognize that millions of people continue pursuing opportunities, building careers, raising families, and investing their futures in the United States. For many observers, that reality presents a more complicated picture than describing the country as a failed experiment. Ultimately, the debate comes down to a simple question. America is not perfect, and few people seriously claim otherwise. The real issue is whether the country remains worth improving. Bill Maher's argument suggests the answer is yes, and that meaningful progress requires open discussion, mutual respect, and the ability to balance gratitude with criticism, instead of allowing either one to dominate the conversation. According to that perspective, maintaining that balance is far more productive than embracing constant despair. What do you think about the debate? Was Bill Maher right to challenge this mindset, or did Sunny Hostin make a valid point? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more discussions covering today's biggest political debates, media moments, and cultural conversations.